As I was saying, this water was pouring out of my mouth, like probably 2 or 3 cups of water. Choked up seawater was just kept coming out. And my boss said, "It's his own effing fault he gave a 3 pull command. That's a bag of fish. It's his own effing fault." And he walked away. And the other diver was saying, "Come on, Doug, get in the boat, man, get in." And he said, "Do you need help?" And I said, "No, I can get in." So I climbed over the handrail and I got on the boat. I took off my dive kit, and my boss is just losing his mind. He's cursing his head off. He took the regulator, and I was explaining, and I said the regulator froze and it free flowed. I had to go to the pony bottle. I gave a 4 pull command to let you guys know I was returning to the surface. He said, "You gave a 3 pull command. That's a bag of fish." I said, "What does a bag of fish mean? Nobody told me this command." And I said, "What did you guys pull me up with, the crane?" And then the, the other uh, the other diver there, he said, "They pulled you up with the fish hauler, Doug." I said, "Where's the fish hauler, man? Like, what the hell is going on here?" And he said, "See that big white thing over there?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "That's a fish hauler." And at this point, I'm just trying my best not to lose consciousness. And I started coughing, and some blood came up, a little bit more water. And my boss took the regs off my air tank, off my main tank. He took the regs off, and I said, "There's got to be a way to find out how fast I just came up. We got to find out how fast I just came up, and so we can tell the doctors." And my boss took my regulators off the main tank, and he flicked them right at my legs. And he said, "Yeah, we can look at the dive computer. That's how we're going to find out how fast you came up." And he took my dive computer off my hand, and still at this point, I'm not sure if I'm going to collapse. I literally felt like I was going to die right then and there. And I'm thinking, these people I need these people to help me. If I collapse right now, my life is in their hands. I need them to help me to do CPR or whatever it is I'm going to need to get through this. And I'm telling you, it was the scariest thing I've ever been through my entire life. And when the other 2 divers found out what happened, the other 2 dive supervisors, dive number 2 that was on the other side of the cage, she came up a few minutes after my dive. And the other dive supervisor that was in the wheelhouse when this happened. When diver number 2 found out what happened, or actually it was the dive supervisor that was in the wheelhouse, when he found out that I got pulled up full speed on the fish hauler, he said, "We got to get the emergency oxygen kit open, and we got to call the hospital. We're going to need a chopper lift out of here." And that's exactly what was supposed to happen. There's an emergency oxygen kit that you only use in this type of emergency. It's 100% oxygen, and that would have helped force some of the nitrogen out of my blood to keep me conscious, and would have lessened some of the damage um, until I could get to the hospital and get in the hyperbaric chamber. Then they would have compressed me back down to the same depth that I was, and slowly brought me up from 92 feet again to the surface, um, to try and reverse or reduce the effects of um, decompression illness, and to try and save my life. And my boss stopped him. He said, "Don't even think about opening the oxygen kit. Diver number two came up and she said, "What? He got pulled up on a fish hauler? I'm going to get the oxygen kit right now. Let's call for help." And she ran out of the wheelhouse to go get the oxygen kit. And my boss yelled this time to the top of his lungs. He said, "If anyone touches that effing oxygen kit, you're all fired." He said, "Doug's going to be fine. I've been through this before. I'm going to give him a headache pill and something to drink. He's going to be okay." And I was so messed up, I didn't know how injured I was. After I had the diver who saw me get pulled up on the fish hauler, he helped me get my dry suit down to my waist. I drank some water and I was able to cool down and regain calm breathing again. And the feeling of I'm about to pass out kind of went away. And my boss and the dive supervisor that was in the wheelhouse, they both looked at my dive computer, and what they saw was very alarming. And I could tell that they were talking to each other like, "This is really bad. We got to get him to the hospital." And my boss kept saying, "No, nobody's going to the effing hospital." And I'm just in the wheelhouse. I'm sitting down on a bench, and my right eye is going like this. It's already like wavering. It's pointing up and on a 45. The other one is looking straight. And I just felt like throwing up, and I felt like going to sleep. I was like super nauseous and super tired, and my head felt like a basketball. Like it was compressed like you would not believe, to the point where I couldn't even think. And I was just waiting for someone to help me or bring me to the hospital or something. I didn't know what was going to happen next. I was just trying to breathe and trying to stay alive, really. I didn't know what was going on. I was in shock, probably. And one of the dive supervisors looked at me and he said, "Look me in the eye, Doug." When I looked him in the eye, he said, "Your eyes are all fucked up, man." He said, we're going to do something for you." Nothing happened. Nobody helped me. Despite two of the other dive supervisors trying to do the right thing and to try and get me medical aid, my boss blocked it and there was no medical aid. He actually ordered the rest of the divers to continue working. And they kept diving. And about an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes after that fish hauler incident, my boss told me, "Okay, you're fine now. You got to get back in the water." And I was like, "I'm still hurt here, man. I don't feel good at all. Like my eyes are messed up. My head feels like a basketball. I feel like throwing up. I feel like going to sleep. This can't be right, man. I don't think this is going away. Like, I don't feel any better. I don't think I should dive." And he said, "If you don't get in the effing water right now, you're fired for sure." And I said, "I don't know, man. I don't know." And I walked away. I went to the washroom, had a leak. And when I came out of the washroom, he was right in my face like this. He said, "If you don't get in the effing water right now, I'm driving you back and you're fired. You're never going to work here again." And, you know, on any other job, that would not have had any effect on me. I would have said, "Okay, take your job and shove it. I really don't need it, man. I'm going to drive myself to the hospital." But I was in shock. Like I was not making the right decisions at all. I didn't know what the hell was going on. And actually started suiting up to go diving again after he almost took my life. And the dive supervisor that was in the wheelhouse, he came out and tried to refuse the work for me. He said, "You can't send Doug in. He's messed up, man. He's injured. You can't send him in for another dive." And he said, "Shut the F up. Everyone here, just shut up. Doug, get in the water right now." And I put my gear on and I went for a second dive, not knowing if I was even going to make it back from it. And the part, the part that you know, I know I was in shock because I was kind of laughing, like, and I was the most injured I've ever been in my life. I was laughing in between little spurts of laughter, back to like I'm gonna throw up, I'm gonna pass out, and then I would giggle a little bit. And as he was threatening me and yelling directly in my face, I laughed. And the other divers didn't know how to take it. I didn't even know why I was laughing. Anyway, I said, as I was jumping in the water, if I don't make it out, tell my mom and my kids that I love them. And I laughed and jumped in the water. Now, that wasn't me. If I was in the right state of mind, I never would have said anything along those lines. I'm not out there to risk my life or be a hero or a champion for any job. I'm there to make a living and to get home safely to my kids. And I went right back down to max depth again for my second dive after being injured, drowning, and decompression symptoms already. I got down there and I was confused. I started doing my work, but I stopped, and I didn't know why I was even down there. I didn't realize that I even had taken a dive again, and I was questioning, like, what's going on? Why am I down here right now? I'm by myself again, and I didn't fill up the bags of fish this time. I didn't even stay. Normally, I go straight down and work my way. This time I went down and I went out into the center of the net, and I only worked around a little bit, picked up some salmon. And I always came back and ascended right next to the ship. So when I surfaced, I was right next to the ship. This time I ascended right in the center of the cage. And about halfway up, not even halfway, around the 60-foot mark, my legs stopped working as I was making my way up. They wouldn't kick. I couldn't move. It was like I was paralyzed for a few seconds. And I started sinking again, and I couldn't get my legs to move at all. And so I started adding air quickly, because as soon as you start going down, every 3 feet, you have to equalize your ears. And so I was like this, pop, 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 trying to get my legs to start kicking again, and using my ear and my dry suit to try and regain buoyancy, because I was sinking fast. Once you're down around 60 feet and you're not kicking, or you don't have enough air, you actually sink really fast down at those depths. And so I had pain in my ear, and it was scary, like really scary, not being able to move my legs. And it only happened for a few seconds, but I did drop about 15 feet. And 15 or 20 feet, I was getting close to the bottom again before I got my legs to start working again. I came up in the middle of the net. My boss was yelling and cursing and swearing from the boat. And I remember thinking, like, this must be a bad dream. Like, this can't be real. This doesn't seem real at all. I hope I'm gonna wake up now. This is like a nightmare. And everyone just packed up their stuff. We got on the boss's boat and drove for 2 hours, sailed for 2 hours back to port. And I was sitting on the back of the boat on the way back into port. My boss actually came out on the back of the boat with my dive computer in his hand, and he made a motion like he was going to throw it over the side of the boat. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, nothing." And he brought my dive computer back into the wheelhouse. That was weird. That's probably where my dive computer is right now, in the bottom of the ocean. We went back in the wheelhouse, and I was falling asleep at this point. Like, it was hard for me to even stay awake. And it was the most horrible feeling, like a hollow feeling in the ears, but major pressure in the head and major pain across here. This eyeball was going like this. Every time I closed it, it was doing this. And when I had it open, it was pointing like this, like going like this. I looked messed up. I felt messed up. They asked me 2 or 3 times on the way on the sail back to the dock, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I'm not okay. I feel like I'm going to pass out right now. I'm falling asleep. I think I need to go to the hospital." I said that at least 3 or 4 times in the sail. I said it again in the truck ride from the dock back to the boss's house. And he kept saying, "If you still feel like this when we get to shore, I'm going to take you to the hospital." And when we got back to the house, he said, "Okay, we'll see you guys tomorrow." And he walked into his house and slammed the door. I went back. I was staying with diver number 2, staying at her house. And I went back to her house, and I just went into the room that she was renting to me and laid down on the bed. And I remember thinking, if this is even real, if this actually happened today, I hope to God I wake up tomorrow. Because I don't think I'm going to. I still felt like I was going to die at that point. And I fell asleep. I woke up feeling like garbage again the next day. I told my boss, "And I'm still messed up. I got to go to the hospital. I can't dive today. Like, if you absolutely need me there, we can go to the hospital after the shift or whatever. I can go and try and help out, but I can't dive. Like, my ears are messed up. My head is messed up. My eyes. I feel tired. I feel dizzy. Everything felt off." And he threatened my job and said, you have to dive today." And the dive supervisor that was in the wheelhouse, he called in sick. He was very angry with the dive boss for the way he acted. You know, it's one thing to break all these safety rules. It's another thing to have no safety program and to intentionally break all these safety rules and to almost kill a fella on the job. But to refuse medical care after a serious injury, that's criminal negligence right there. I mean, there's a million excuses about why he broke all these safety rules. But to almost take someone's life and then refuse them medical care, that's criminal negligence. He should have been in jail. He should go to jail for that. At the end of the second day, I did a couple of really shallow dives the next day, 6-foot dive and a 20-foot dive, something like that. It was inspecting the underside of the handrail of one of the cages for the first dive. And for the second dive, was inspecting the net itself for holes. And again, he had 3 divers in the cage. After all that happened the day before, he did the same thing again the following day. He put 3 divers in the cage with 1 pony bottle. And the deepest diver wore the pony bottle. It was a 100-foot cage. So I told him I'm staying shallow, so my job was from the surface down to 30, inspect the net all the way around. Second diver went from 30 to 60, feet deep, inspecting the net, and the bottom diver inspected from 60 down to 100. Only one of us had a pony bottle. And then he lost his mind again when I told him, yeah, I saw a hole in the net. And he said, why didn't you surface immediately right where the hole was? And I said, well, for two reasons. The first reason is there's only one pony bottle for 3 divers. Again, you're making us work unsafely. And for 2, you only have one thread and needle to fix the net. You sent 3 divers in with only one tool to repair the net. And I didn't have the tool. And so the divers that are deeper than me have the tool for repairing the net, so I have to wait for them to finish their dive anyway. And because they're diving down there, only one of them has a pony bottle. I stayed in the water and swam along with them as we were doing our tour, in case one of them needed help. I could surface. There was no audio or video communication. I could surface and ask for help, or do something. But he wanted me to surface right away as soon as I found a hole. I didn't do that. Anyway, he lost his mind and was cursing his head off at me again. And that's when I said, you know what? Actually, I waited until we got back to shore, and I told him, this job is not safe for me. I'm going to have to quit. And I'm really not feeling well. You didn't bring me to the hospital, man. And I quit my job and drove home for 6 hours. I actually drove to the hospital in that town, and I was so messed up and nervous. For some reason, I was nervous about going into the hospital for treatment. That's how messed up I was. I was afraid to go in and get help. When really, that's exactly what I needed. Instead, I sat there in my truck for close to an hour, and then the only thing I wanted to do was just get the hell away from that town, as far away as I could. I wanted to see my kids again. I wanted to give them a hug. I wanted to see my family again. And I just had a feeling to just get the hell away from there. And so I drove from that town back to St. John's. It was over a 6-hour drive. I called my buddy and I asked him to stay on the phone with me the whole time. I told him what happened. And I told him I'm not sure if I can even make it home driving. Like, I need you to talk to me and stay with me, man, until I get home. I got home and I fell asleep, and I slept for 18 hours straight. I woke up dizzy and nauseous and had all the same feelings still, like major pressure in my head. My eyeball was twitching, either twitching or just like straining. It was like my eyeball was straining hard to look that way, but it was involuntary. And the following day I slept like 16 hours. I'd wake up for long enough for to take a leak and take a shower. I felt like a hot shower would help the symptoms go away a little bit. Right after the hot shower, go right back to bed and go to sleep again. It was like 15 hours, 16 hours, 18 hours again, and literally only up for an hour or two in between, not even, sometimes only an hour. And this went on for like 7 days straight. My buddies were calling me nonstop because they heard about what had happened, but I wasn't answering my phone. After about, I answered the phone maybe once or twice and just told them I'm okay. I'm just really tired. I'm going back to sleep. Or I'm just getting in the shower now. I'm really tired. I'm going back to sleep. And after they kept getting the same message from me for like 5, 6, 7 days straight, they came over and they asked, can we come over? And I said, no, it's not a good time. I'm just really tired. I'm going right back to bed. And they asked that on like day 5. They asked again on day 6. On day 7, they came over. I kept telling them, no, I'm fine. On day 7, they came over and said, Dougie, you're not fine, man. You need to go to the hospital. You're messed up big time, buddy. They said, did you eat? And I said, I don't think so. He said, you haven't eaten in a week, man. You haven't even eaten anything. And then that's when I realized that I was really, really messed up. Like to go for a week without eating something. After that was around day 7 or 8 after quitting my job. One of my buddies said, "Come with me, Dougie, man. Stay with me for a few days." And they were trying to convince me to go to the hospital, and for some reason I was in denial. Like I kept saying that I was okay, and they were telling me, "You're not, man. You're different. You're different than what you used to be, my buddy." And I stayed with my friend for 2 or 3 days, and he made sure that I ate 3 meals a day, and I got a good sleep, and we were going around and doing things instead of just staying in bed and sleeping 18 hours straight and then up for an hour and then sleep again for another 18. I stayed up with him for 2 or 3 days and did normal things like eat again and sleep normal amounts of time and stuff like that. That was one of the biggest injuries I had was memory loss and appetite loss and major nausea. So in around June 20th, my dive boss gave me a call and to check on me, and he asked how I was doing, and I said, I'm actually feeling better today. And I was hoping that this was just like a short-term injury, at the worst a week and a half, something like that, and all the symptoms were just going to go away. But I was in complete denial. I think I was just hoping that it was going to not be as bad as what it was. And I told him that I was feeling a lot better, and he apologized. He said he felt like he really let me down, and none of that should have happened, and that he realizes that he needs a safety program, and that he would like to take me up on my offer. I actually offered him before all this happened, when all the red flags started to show up in the first couple months of working with this company. I told him I have experience. I got a certificate in OH&S. I can help you develop a safety program. I can I can make it so that you're following all the safety rules and you actually have a safety program, and you can keep your guys safe and you can address their concerns, and it can be all documented. And if anything ever happens, I told them, you're going to have to prove due diligence. You're going to have to prove that you have a safety program and you did everything in your power you could possibly do to keep your workers safe. I said, right now you have nothing to show for that. not one piece of paper. And so he said, come back to work, and if you're feeling okay, then we'll get you diving again. But even if you're on light duty, I want you to come back to work, and we'll work through this together, right? And I had forgotten most of the reasons why I quit in the first place, right? And I went back to work on June 22nd. I drove back to work on the 21st, and on June 22nd I dove again. First day back to work, there was no real talk about getting the safety program developed. He said they called me about this first thing this morning. It was supposed to be done by another dive company. We need to get it done ASAP. And it was another dive down to max depth. He said, don't worry, I'm going to stay right next to you this time. We're going to be buddy diving. We're going to stay within visual contact. And we're going to double check all our gear, make sure everything is working properly. He also said the regulator that you had that free float, when I went to get it serviced, I told him what happened with the free flows. And when they went to repair it, they realized there was a safety recall from the manufacturer on that specific regulator for the reason of it being prone to free flows and freeze up in diving in cold water. So the rig I was using actually had a safety recall on it. It should not have been in service in the first place. How was that able to happen? Well, the people who service it and the manufacturer, they told, I'm not sure exactly what happened there. The guy servicing it found out about the recall once he went to service it again. But there was a communication failure somewhere along the way. The manufacturer didn't obviously reach out. I guess they can't reach out to everyone who has that rig. They have no real way of knowing exactly who has each regulator unless they're signed up on a registry or some kind of client mail out list or something like that. But anyway, I went back and we dove down to max depth. Before we went down, though, there was something a little bit odd going on. One diver number 2 was there, and she discovered that one of the O-rings was leaking in the valve at the top of the tank for the regulator valves. There's a little O-ring in there, and that was leaking. And she asked my boss if he had an O-ring kit to replace it, and he didn't. And so there was a big argument about that, and the solution was just grab another tank and take the O-ring out of that. And I said, well, why don't we just red flag the tank with the bad O-ring and use a different tank, make sure that one's not leaking. But for some reason, diver number 2 took the O-ring out of another tank and replaced it into that tank. I think she already had it set up on her kit or something like that. Then there was a tank that didn't have an O-ring, or it had a damaged O-ring. For some reason, the tanks didn't get labeled or marked so it could be put aside. It just got shuffled back into the pile of tanks that were there, 8 or 10 tanks. And I think I got the tank with the faulty O-ring on it. I just suited up and I forgot to do my safety checks. There was something off, and that was one of it. It was my memory. I was forgetting to do my safety checks at this point. Me and my dive boss, we dive down to max depth. We're collecting up the dead salmon, and after about 5 minutes of working, we're both in visual contact. We're working away for about 5 minutes, and he comes over towards me, and he's got a look on his face like he's concerned. He's looking over the top of my head, looking towards my tank where the regulator valve is. And he says, 1 second. He looks up even closer at my tank. And then he looks back down at me, and I said, is everything okay? And he said, everything's okay. I said, okay. And he swam away. I kept working. Something sounded a little bit different in my ear as well. I couldn't hear a leak, but something sounded a little bit different on that dive. My ears were still hurting a little bit. My head was still starting to hurt again, right? So I wasn't 100% sure if I was leaking or not. This time we actually each had a pony bottle on us. And about 3 minutes after that happened, I ran out of air. And this was very short into my dive. I had gone for dives for much longer than that. It wasn't because I was hyperventilating or working too hard or anything like that. I was working like I always did. And just all of a sudden, I was out of air. No more air at all in the main tank. Luckily, I had a lung full of air. I looked down at my gauge. It's down below zero, completely empty. I immediately grabbed the regulator from my pony bottle, flicked off the main reg, switched to the pony bottle, started breathing again. And right after my boss checked on me and he told me I was fine, he swam away, which was the opposite of what he said he was going to do. He said he was going to stay right next to me the whole time. He swam almost to the other side of the cage. And so when I ran out of air, once again, I was completely alone. And I switched to the pony bottle and I looked around and he was too far. He was far enough that I couldn't even really see him. And he told me on this dive, I want to put the dive tether on you so that'll make you feel a little bit safer too. And I said, that doesn't really make me feel any safer. And he said, no, but I want you to have the dive tether on you just in case for this dive, which was another strange thing that happened. And so after I switched to the pony bottle, I I didn't do a 4 rope pull at all. I just forgot about that as well and just started to ascend. On my way up, I realized that as I was working back and forth picking up all the dead salmon, the rope was getting entangled in my legs. I didn't realize this until I'm trying to make my ascent and abort the dive, breathing off the pony bottle. I got up around 65 feet and I was getting more and more entangled. The more I tried to get the rope off my legs, the worse it got, and got to the point where I couldn't even kick. Then I started to sink, and then I started to panic. It's the first time I ever panicked diving. And I kicked even more, and I got tight. The rope got tighter and tighter, and I was like I was tying a noose on my legs, like a slip knot or something. Anyway, I started to panic, and then I started. Normally, when you're scuba diving, you're only using your legs. They say to use your arms and legs is a waste of energy, and it takes too much energy and oxygen and stuff like that. It's more sleek and energy efficient to only use your legs. And they were all tangled up, so I just started swimming like crazy with my hands, and I swam to the top. I looked at my alarm. The alarm on my dive computer was going off for fast ascent. I was going up a little bit faster than 1 foot per second. This time I wasn't drowning. I made it to the surface, and the other diver came over, and I was clinging on to the net like this. I took my regulator out, and I had a look on my face like a deer in the headlights, he said. And you could see that I was panicking as soon as he saw me. And I was just holding my head above water and holding on to the net for dear life. And my boss came up and he gave me some air from his main tank so I could inflate my dry suit again. It was harder to come up to because I didn't have any air from my main tank to aid for buoyancy. So it was like dead weight trying to swim up from 100 feet. And that's another reason why it was so hard, and another reason why I panicked, because it didn't feel like I could get up out of it. I was so entangled in the rope and so heavy without any buoyancy help from my dry suit. So anyway, I got back on the boat and I broke down and cried. And I said, I can't dive anymore, man. This is not for me. And I quit my job again right then and there. And I drove home again. And the symptoms, when I got to the surface and when I got back on the boat, my head was compressed just as bad as the fish hauler incident. Right after the fish hauler, like this time, it felt exactly as bad. And I was telling my boss, my head is killing me again. It's just like when I got hauled up on a fish hauler. It is pounding like crazy. And he continued his dives. He still got his job done. He went and did a couple more dives. We went back to town. And I told him again, like, I can't stay here, man. Like, I'm messed right up here again. And that was really scary getting there today. And like, I said, I don't know what to do. I'm quitting my job, man. And I might have to go to the hospital. I'll let you know what happens. I quit and I drove home. And the symptoms, they weren't quite as bad after the first 2 weeks. But there was still lots of exhaustion and the nausea. I did wake up and there was pink dots all over my back, the backs of my arms, my neck. When I was getting in the shower one day, I looked at my back in the mirror and it was completely covered, like worse than chickenpox. Looks like it was literally a little pink dot every quarter inch. And I'm guessing that's the nitrogen trying to work its way out through the body. And that's around that time is when the nervous system injury started to show itself. And my nerves would just fire like this, like all the time, especially my shoulders or my neck goes like this. You've probably seen it 20 or 30 times throughout this video. I've noticed that I am twitching while I'm talking to you. Other times my head will go back like this, just like someone punched me in the face, or it goes like this, or the rest of my body will just have like in weird places, like on the top of my right quad, that muscle fires, or it could be my left calf, and it'll be just firing off just like I'm getting shock treatment or something like that. Other times I'll be watching TV and my feet will bend all the way up towards my knees and they'll be like straining like this. until the point where it starts hurting. That's when I realize, holy, my feet are they're pointing towards the sky, like to the point where they're straining. When I'm under stress, my back arches like this, and it'll stay like that until it starts to hurt, and I realize, holy, like I'm bent right out of shape here. I think that's where the term bent comes from. Is from the divers would be literally bent out of shape. They'd be thrown right off. Um, I know there's probably some symptoms that I can't even really think of right now because my memory's so bad. Around June 30th, things were getting so bad that I called my boss and I said, I gotta go to the hospital, man. Things are getting really weird. And my symptoms are not going away, and there's more symptoms appearing that I didn't have in the first 10 days there after the fish hauler. And I no doubt when I look back at it now, I probably caused even more damage. I'm sure it was more damaging to continue diving instead of being put on emergency 100% oxygen. And they should have sent a chopper in to fly right to the dive site. And the protocol is to stay below 1,000 feet. When you have a diver that comes up with a rapid ascent like that and decompression illness, the chopper will actually stay below 1,000 feet and it'll pin it straight to the hospital, get you into the hyperbaric chamber. But like I stutter, stutter now. That's something that I never had growing up at all in my life. A lot of times I'll try to talk and the words just won't come out. Only a little grunt will come out sometimes. I had barrel trauma to my ears and to my sinuses. There's a deep sinus directly in from here. It's like a round sinus that's right above the roof of your mouth. That one had extra fluid on it. They could tell from the CT scan, and that one was very painful. The roof of my mouth was hurting a lot. These sinuses up here though were the worst. They were actually swollen. They were like this, like swollen. My eyebrows, right down like this. They were really like just out. I could see them. They were swollen that much, and that was one of the most painful parts. It felt like someone had their knuckles like just grinding their knuckles right into the top of my eyebrows on both sides. And my ear, like both sides of my neck was hurting, and it still does. But this ear, even the whole side of my head would get red and inflamed. And it felt like on fire. It felt hot. It looked red. And the doctor, the ENT, and the other doctors that saw it, they said it's your left eardrum is really scarred up. It looks like shattered glass, almost. It has that much scarring on it. And they did a balance test on me when I went to the hospital, and I failed all 4 balance tests. And there was 2 or 3 different balance tests, but the last one I failed 4 times in a row, the same test. And what they were getting me to do was close my eyes, bend down slightly, and try to take 3 or 4 steps backwards in a straight line. And I'd get probably 1 or 2 steps in and I'd fall right down on the floor. And the 4th time I went flying, I almost went right through the wall. And I said, that's 4 times I fell down. Doctors said, I can't do it. I'm failing that test. They said, yeah, we agree with that. And so I notice now with my balance, I'll be walking down a hallway and then I'll just take like a couple steps to the left, and I'll be able to correct. It's not like a dizziness. Like I don't feel like vertigo, or I don't feel like I can't tell which way is up or down. It's just more so a little bit of balance, left to right. Sometimes when I'm going upstairs and I go to take a step, instead of my balance going ahead and going up the stairs, I'll lean right back like this and start losing my balance. Um, anyway, the hospital is supposed to fill out forms. The first question they ask you is, did this injury happen at work? And when you say yes, they're supposed to start filling out a form that goes directly to Workplace NL. That's the workers' compensation agency here in Newfoundland. And that's supposed to trigger an investigation, especially for serious incidents. It might not trigger an investigation for a cut on the finger or something minor, but something that's near fatal um, should definitely trigger an investigation. And I had serious injuries. Um, so the hospital, for some reason, did not fill out the forms, did not send any paperwork over to Workplace NL. And so there was no investigation started, and there was no compensation started at all for me. And I kept going back to the doctors and asking for referrals to the ENT, asking for MRIs, asking for to speak with a neurologist for all the neurological problems I was having. Um, and I had to get referrals to eye doctors, an optometrist, and an ophthalmologist. And even to this day, it's not so bad now. But even to this day, I do wake up and this right eye is straining straight towards my nose, or it'll be straining away, up and away on a 45. And to the point where I'll wake up with a headache. That eyeball, it gets pressurized, even with the difference in the weather and the barometric pressure outside. My eyes get pressurized, they get really bloodshot um, since the diving accident. And so after, like, by the time September rolled around, I was like, when is somebody going to call me to ask me questions for the investigation? I called Workplace NL and asked them that, and they said, what investigation? We don't know what you're talking about. We don't have any paperwork about any incident at all here. And that's when I realized the hospital didn't send their forms over to them at all. My boss did not report the accident. That's a charge in itself that he should have been charged with. And so I had to report the accident, and then I asked them, are you going to report this to OH&S, or do you guys do the investigation? They said, oh no, we don't do investigations, we just look after the compensation part of it. And we like to review it up to 13 weeks. We have up to 13 weeks to decide whether or not we're going to give you any compensation at all. And so that's our job, is just to work on whether or not discovering whether or not this is a workplace injury and whether or not you're eligible for compensation. And so I said, this was a near fatal accident. There's nobody going to reach out to the OH&S to start an investigation. And they said, no, that's not what we do. And I said, how do you guys work? Like, someone can be almost somebody can be crippled or have their lives completely ruined, and you don't think that an investigation is warranted? You don't talk to your government entity that doesn't talk to the government entity that investigates the accidents? This doesn't make any sense. And they couldn't come up with a straight answer or a sane answer as to why that's going on. But anyway, I had to report the accident to OH&S, and I wrote a statement. It was extra long, as this documentary is. There was a lot that happened, and I was injured, and there was probably a little bit of rambling in there, but I had to get my point across about how serious the accident was and exactly how serious these injuries are that I'm going through. And so I ended up writing a 28-page witness statement, sent that over to the OH&S, and they said they started an investigation. For the next 27 months, I emailed them every month or every 2 months and asked them for an update on the investigation. And nobody called. Nobody wanted to ask me one question about how this happened. Nobody did a stop work order to get the company back in line with safety rules and regulations to make sure that nobody was going to die on that site. Nobody thought to check their safety program, or the fact that there was no safety program. And so over the next 27 months, I'm going to pull up the emails here now, and I'm going to read out a couple of them to you. All right, folks, if you made it this far and you haven't already, please click the like button, hit the subscribe, and share this documentary with your friends. It could literally save a life. So before we go through the emails that I had with the Occupational Health and Safety Department for the Government of Newfoundland, I'm going to point out a few things here that are going to be mentioned a little bit later on in this documentary. For example, my incident happened on June 9th, 2020. OH&S started investigating September 15th, 2020. And on the 21st of October, 2020, a month later, the investigating officer for OH&S performed an unannounced visit to the dive site. And what he observed was one of the divers had been dressed in and in the water, ready to perform the dive. And the OH&S officer asked how much air was in the bailout bottle or pony bottle. The diver replied that the bottle was full, however the gauge was broken. And so that is another prime example of the employer providing faulty equipment and risking his employees' lives on a daily basis. And I wanted to mention that because it shows that even beyond this incident, there was no stop work order. And normally in the rest of Canada, OH&S investigating officers would issue a stop work order for a near fatal incident and completely shut down the job and investigate the incident and find out how we can continue working, if at all, in a safe manner. And the OH&S in Newfoundland does not issue stop work orders for near fatal accidents. They also don't issue fines like the rest of the OH&S departments across Canada. For some reason in Newfoundland, they don't think fines are an incentive for employers to maintain safe and healthy workplaces, which is ridiculous. That's something that needs to be changed. And so this incident here, he was issued, my criminal dive boss was issued another order by the OH&S to comply with the safety legislation here in Canada for diving. And however, they mentioned it to me a little bit later. You're going to see in the call, I have an audio recorded and video recorded call with the OH&S. And you're going to see that they try to mention that they took corrective actions by issuing that order on October of 2020 for the faulty gauge. And that incident is completely separate from the near fatal incident that I had. It's not a corrective action for my incident, and it's simply a continuation of negligence, is what it is. And so it's not the employer proving due diligence, which is what the OH&S was thinking and hoping. It's just a blatant display of a disregard for safety laws and rules. And he was caught once again just 1 month after the OH&S started to investigate. And that shows you that employers that are criminals, that don't care, that feel like they're completely unaccountable and they're above the law, just like my dive boss thought he was, they will continue to break the laws. When they know that they have protection from their buddies at the OH&S, they will continue to break the laws and risk lives, and there will be further injuries and deaths on the salmon farm, just like I warned the OH&S if they didn't take swift action. And I mentioned stop work orders and everything else, and they acted like they never heard of the term, which is very, very concerning. Next, I'm going to mention how many orders have been written against these two companies. I just got to find that in the investigation here. So I'll be right back. So looking in the investigation report here, I can see that my former dive company I was employed with had 5 inspections performed on his work operations between September 2018 and February of 2021, and there were 12 orders issued, which means he had 12 safety violations. It says all orders have been complied with. So there was no fines, no charges, with 12 safety violations in that 3-year span. The prime contractor, which is the salmon company itself, they're a multi-billion-dollar company, by the way, and they can afford to employ safety people. It says right here they have in excess of 80 employees in these salmon farms, and I didn't meet one safety person. There was not one safety meeting for the prime contractor or my contractor. There was not one toolbox talk. So there was not one opportunity to raise these safety concerns, have them documented, and have them actioned upon. So have someone take action. Like for example, when we couldn't get the proper dry suits, that should have been documented in a weekly or even a daily toolbox talk. Could be documented, and it has to be actioned and corrected. The safety hazard has to be corrected, and you have to assign that task to somebody, which would obviously be the owner of the company, to communicate to the salmon company, we need these dry suits, and here's the invoice. And so when I say they didn't have a safety program, that's what I'm referring to. Is there was no toolbox talks at all. None of that was documented because it didn't happen. There was 0 safety meetings at all. And like I said, all these safety concerns that myself and every other member of the crew were raising, none of them were documented. They were simply laughed off and not addressed by this criminal employer. And that's how accidents happen. There was also no auditing. Part of the safety program is having an independent auditor look at your safety program for the last 3 years and see, are you performing toolbox talks? Are you having weekly safety meetings? At the very least, monthly safety meetings? Are the concerns of the employees being addressed? Are they documenting it properly? Are they are they keeping record of all their paperwork, like site inspections or equipment inspections? Um, those types of things. This is the type of things that you need to prove due diligence. Everywhere else in Canada, the OH&S demands that the employer prove due diligence, which means you did absolutely everything you could in your power to keep your employees safe. Now, here in Newfoundland, it's like they don't understand the term due diligence. My boss was not asked to prove any due diligence other than provide a copy of certificates and a copy of their safe operating procedures. Um, and um, they took statements and stuff like that. But it's worth noting that the investigating officer waited 6 months to take statements for a near fatal accident. So, what goes on in 6 months? How many people can die? A lot. The whole crew could die. And then in those 6 months, while the OH&S officer dragged his heels and didn't feel like going out to the site to take witness statements from the rest of the crew. Now, there was 8 people that witnessed the event. The investigator only spoke to the 4 dive crew members that I had. And for some reason, they did not interview the boat's captain, the boat's first mate, or the 2 farm workers who all witnessed the fish hauler incident.